Welcome to H2K Infosys. H2K Infosys is a e-verify business based in Atlanta, Georgia, United States. We provide 100% job-oriented, instructor-led, face-to-face, true live online software training programs. It also includes access to Cloud Test Lab with software tools. We provide live project for you to work on. We also provide assistance with mock interviews, resume preparation and review, and job placement assistance. H2K Infosys is trusted by so many students across the world. H2K Infosys provides world-class services in IT training with real-time project work for corporates and individuals, special IT training for MS students in the United States, software design, development, QA manual and automation, performance testing and maintenance, IT staff augmentation, job placement assistance, and tech support.
Let us execute this one. You can see that Celsius to Fahrenheit result, this is 95. It has contacted the WSDL URL. The WSDL location was available at this level. Once after that, it has executed the method Celsius to Fahrenheit by passing this as a big decimal, and I'm able to get the result. So normally, when you're working on only on the client side, you will receive the WSDL file like this. Whatever that we have done, we just need to generate the client artifacts, and we are supposed to use the port details and call the corresponding method to get the result. This is how we are supposed to work when you are only working on the client side. At Seekda.com, you can search for some other stuff also, whatever the web services that you want to test, and make sure that verify whether the web service is up or not. So these are provided to Seekda a very long time. So some of the services might not be up or not. So you just need to verify and then only generate the client artifacts. Will the user come to Java code and enter the value like 35? Yeah, we'll discuss that, Vijay, in a second. Currently, we are talking only in the enterprise application side, but not the web application side. I'll provide you two more scenarios. Based on that, you will be able to understand. Just give me 2 more minutes. Until now, we are seeing only the success results. So that means we are just querying with the success values. Previously also we have queried our client application with Steve, and we are able to get the success result. Let us say we are querying with the wrong results, or let us say we are querying with some unknown data which was not available at the server level. So that means the server was supposed to respond back to the client by saying an exception. Come back to our client code one more time. Come back to our employee detail service client one more time, and we enter the details as Chris and Steve. So this was not available in my database. That means from the server side, it will throw an exception specifying that the details are not available. But normally the client and server will reside on different machines. If you throw an exception, that won't be responded back to the client properly. SOAP will construct an error message that will be specified by using SOAP fault. Whenever there are any issues with the server handling, whenever there are any issues on the server side, if you want to inform the same back to the client, you can construct an object SOAP fault exception. See, currently our transport layer is SOAP protocol only. So SOAP envelope will consist of SOAP envelope. Here you can see that within the body, either we can respond back with the actual result, or we can respond back with a fault message which consists of fault code and fault string values. So by using SOAP fault exception, you can prepare this SOAP fault messages, and when responding back to the client will take a look at this particular block and understands that there is an issue with respect to the request, and he'll be going to correct the request details. So first of all, we need to handle the exception at the server level. So come back to our server side code. So currently, let us come back to get user data by employee ID method. So we are passing some data 10 and some password value. It has contacted the employee processor and contacted the database as well, but in database we don't have the employee ID and password combination. So whenever the details are not available, normally to the JSP page will specify that invalid username password occurred or invalid employee ID password details entered. The same message we are supposed to send it back to the client. Currently we are only talking with the business application. So the business client we are discussing. There is no front end, and we have only one option to respond back to the client, that is by using SOAP fault exception. So here when you are responding back to the client, if employee is null, normally when username and password are not available, we'll get the employee value as null. So at this time, you can create the SOAP fault by using SOAP factory. The SOAP factory is nothing but a factory class which will create any kind of objects for SOAP exceptions. Normally factory class, it will be used to provide or to create objects. SOAP factory is an abstract class, so that means you can't create an instance directly. You just need to call the new instance method. Once after that, you can call the you can call the create fault method. See, ultimately we need to create the fault object. So come back here and call the create fault method, which will provide you the SOAP fault object. And the SOAP fault, you need to set the code and string methods. Whatever the names that are available, that will consist of setters and getters. SOAP fault dot set. Here you can see that set fault code. Currently this is server error So I'm just setting it the value as 500, which is internal server error. Set fault error message. Enter the message. And finally, you need to throw the SOAP fault exception. So create a SOAP fault exception object. The SOAP fault exception object accepts a SOAP fault. So whatever the SOAP fault that you have constructed, you can just pass it on to the SOAP fault exception object, and this will throw an exception back to the client. The client was supposed to handle the SOAP fault exception, and he need to retrieve whatever the error code or string that got available from the SOAP fault object, and he need to correct those errors. SOAP fault is a runtime exception. That's why that you don't have any issues even though it was not available in throws clause. Currently, I have the same that was available at this level. I'm just calling the same method. Come back to our client code. So here you can see that I'm calling with respect to Chris and Steve, which is not available in database. Verify this one. We are supposed to handle SOAP fault exception from SOAP fault exception, get the fault message, and then get the fault code. So previously we have used setters on the server side. Now you need to use the getters on the client side. If employee not equal to null, then only retrieve the details. So here the get user data by username, forget about this code. This will contact the server, and finally the employee exception will be thrown from the lower level, that is by our DAO class. Once an exception has arised, here you can see that the same exception message, the SOAP fault exception, will get created at this level, and finally we are throwing the SOAP fault exception back to the client. So when an exception has occurred, we are already handling that by using try catch block. This will receive at this level, and we are printing the fault code and fault message at this level. Let's see whether it works or not. enter some other data. Probably username was available. Our data was only querying based on username. So that's the reason it was not throwing any issue there. Yeah, this time you can see that there is an exception. List size 0. And once after that, employee exception occurred. Web service SOAP fault handling. Exception get message called. And finally, this is the response that we have prepared from our server side. Take this response. You can see that this time SOAP envelope, SOAP body consists of only fault message and the fault code, whatever the message that we have set, sorry, whatever the error code that we have set, and the fault string, invalid username and password. So on the client side also, you can see that exception occurred. Come back to our client code. Exception occurred. SOAP fault code is SE500. And the error message is invalid username and password. So based on this, he was supposed to rectify the usernames and password, whatever that he has sent, and he need to query the data one more time. This is how normally the responses will be sent whenever a fault has occurred or whenever an exception has occurred. Only thing is, within the body, instead of having the normal actual response or the success response, it consists of fault related information. That's the only change. The next thing is authorization. Normally, whenever we have written any web service or any kind of service provider, whenever he has written a service, he just wants some kind of authorization. Whenever the client has sent some request, he wants some kind of authorization with the client request. That means he'll be going to provide some credentials to the client. Credentials will be username or password. So the service provider, he will talk to the client and he'll specify that whenever you are sending any request to the service provider or to my web service, you just need to set these details with the header. Currently, we have discussed about header at this level. You can see that header, it was available at this level. Or else, there is one other way where you can set the header as well. See, this is just like an HTTP request. So, HTTP request consists of header information. Previously, we have seen content type and some header parameters, request method. So these are all just like the normal header parameters. So there itself, you can set the header, the username and password header, and you can send the request to the client. So SOAP has the capability, SOAP processor has the capability of reading those messages from the header, and it will provide you directly the username and password. And based on the username and password verification, SOAP will provide you directly the username and password, and based on the condition, whatever that you are writing, if username dot equals of Steve and password also Steve, then only you are going to process the request, or else you will be going to respond back to the client specifying that there is an issue with the header parameters or the authorization, and please come back with valid credentials. If at all, if the credentials didn't match, you are not going to process the request at all. You are going to respond back to the user specifying that credential issue, and please come back with valid credentials. So that means you are supposed to perform two steps. The first one is on the server side, you need to retrieve the parameters, or you need to retrieve the authorization header, and you need to validate the header parameters whether they are correct or not. And in the same way, on the client side, whenever the client has trying to send the request, this time he was supposed to set the header details and send the request. So on the client side, you are supposed to perform one step, and on the server side, you are supposed to perform two additional steps. On the server side, you are going to use annotation called resource. The resource annotation informs that this is a resource, the variable whatever that we are writing, this is a resource, and the resource needs to be injected automatically by the container itself. So currently I am declaring one resource which is web service context. The web service context has the access to the header information, and whenever you have mentioned that this is a resource, your container will be going to create an object of this one. Your container will create an object of web service context, and it will be going to inject all the properties that are related to your header information. Nothing but whatever the credentials that the client has sent. Normally, whenever you have associated the annotation resource, this will be called as dependency injection. Nothing but the dependencies or the required inputs or the required object creation will be injected automatically by the container itself. We'll discuss about dependency injection more when we enter into Sprints. Now, with each and every method, you need to receive the message context, the message context has get attributes. There is one another important class which is binding provider. By using binding provider class only, you are going to set the request parameters, request headers, nothing but your username and password properties. So binding provider class will consist of, here you can see that static final variables are available. You can just request for username property by using the static field, which will provide you the corresponding value associated with username. And in the same way, you just need to retrieve password as well. This will return the top level object, so convert that to string values. Once you got the username and password, you can just verify whether the username and password matched properly or not. And if the username and password not match, you can create a SOAP fault exception at the same level itself, at this level itself, and you can respond back to the client instead of processing the request at all. So currently you can see that for context, I'm not at all creating any object itself. I just declared only object at the class level. So instance variable normally will consist of a null value, but here you can see that I'm able to call the get message context method. This will definitely return a object. The reason for that is I mentioned that this is an external resource which needs to be injected by the container itself, but not by ourselves. So currently for our get user data by username consists of same code. It will retrieve the message context and it will retrieve the username and password, and I'm just printing the username and password. I'm not writing any validation code and all. You can just enhance this one and you can write the validation code and you can specify that client credential error and specify the error message as provide valid credentials. Come back to our client side. So now from this side, we are supposed to prepare the header parameters with our web service request. Currently you got the port. The port can be automatically converted to the binding provider object. This will be done by our framework itself. Once you have converted the port to binding provider, call the get request context method. This will return a map of string comma object. On the server side, you are retrieving the parameters. So here you just need to put those map values. The key is binding provider dot username property. Let us assume this is str Steve. In the same way, put password also in the binding. Let us say this is str pwd Steve. So this will add both username and property as header parameters, and it will submit the request to the client with authorization header. So on the server side, your container will read the parameters from the SOAP envelope, and it will create the web service context object, and it will create the message context object, and it will associate the username and password at that level. But one thing we need to remember is here you are sending the data as normal strings, strstring and str password string. But while sending the request, your SOAP envelope will use encoding and decoding option for username and password. So username and password.
So many of our students have given testimonials on how our training programs are. You will find them on kudzu.com and on our website H2KInfosys.com. On our website H2KInfosys.com, you will also find more detailed information on who we are, the courses that we offer, what each course covers. Also, if you're interested in a demo program, please register on our homepage on the left-hand side. Just give us more information about yourself and we will send you a link for a demo class. The demo class is absolutely free. Experience our commitment by just attending an orientation workshop at no cost. Our team of faculty and advisors are here to guide you with the right information. If you still have more questions, please feel free to call us. Call us at 770-777-1269. This is a United States number. If you're calling from the UK, call us at 020-337-17615. You can also email us at training@h2kinfosys.com or h2kinfosys@gmail.com. Thank you for watching our videos. We wish you a great career in information technology.